This is the 5-minute sample for Sweet Nothings, East Coast Sugar Daddies Book 5 by Austin Bates. This is my 12th audiobook, and it released on May 5th, 2019. I always wanted to play a sugar daddy, and here I am getting to do it on my 12th book in. With how much these two argue, he's really more of a salty daddy, I guess. It's funny how many of these romance books' relationships are the standard big guy and small guy, because my voice is pretty much only suitable for a small guy, which leads to some funny situations where I sound nothing like how people imagine the big guy to sound. Here's one book where I tried to make a reference with the big guy voice. As soon as I saw that he was named Logan, I knew I had to make him sound like Wolverine. And it's absolutely not the greatest impression in the world, but I did my best. And isn't that the greatest gift of all? Let's go, bub. I can really do that. Let's go, bub. See, it's not bad. Unfortunately, the Logan in this book never says, "Let's go, bub." As for the book, I liked this one a lot. It was fun to read, and the narrative moves along at a really breezy pace. It's not too quick, you get enough development from both of them. But starting it off with them getting together in the closet, I think, at the party, is great. It's a perfect representation of start where the action is. Like, it starts with them doing that, it doesn't flash back to it later or anything. You go right into the book knowing the relationship between these two guys, and from there it just develops naturally. That's the best way you can write a romance, I think, is to just get into it and don't pussyfoot around. So anytime a book does that, you're going to hear me sing praises of it. Now, the chemistry between the two men is really interesting. They're a lot like a bulldog and a house cat, with the way they're constantly circling each other and they're navigating each other's words and picking fights and bickering. And it's great. It's a really captivating dynamic, and it makes you more invested because you get to see both of their points of view in a dynamic where they're almost polar opposites. And that's interesting to me. Of course, it all comes together in the end, they're not going to hate each other always. I wouldn't even call it hate. It's a bit playful, it's a bit rooted in insecurity, it's complex, but it develops into romance. And I thought that was great. I hope you enjoy this 5-minute sample. 4. Logan. Aaron's expression was just too delicious, something I needed to commit to memory for years to come. I really hadn't expected my plan to work so well. I'd only intended to make him uncomfortable with my extremely personal answers to his questions. Making him squirm had been a thrill for me since he began working for me. His cheeks flushed just so, and it seemed as if he wanted nothing more than to sink into the ground in that moment. I wondered if I should have been offended by his sheer disbelief in the result, but I was too swept up in laughter to even care about my ego. I'm sure Aaron would have been dialing the Book of World Records if he wasn't so caught up in trying to regain control of things. His face was ablaze, and it seemed as if that fire wouldn't abate any time soon. He pulled the laptop closer, muttering under his breath as if he were the only one in the room. I recognized that he was reciting lines of code, probably wondering where the app had malfunctioned so magnificently. I wanted to spend the rest of my day poking fun at the young Omega, but I'd had my fun, and really did have business to attend to. Alright, everything seems to be in order. The matching algorithm is obviously at peak performance, so it seems you don't have anything to worry about, I said mockingly, a bit disheartened when he refused to even look up at me. Listen, Aaron, I'm sure there are going to be flukes here and there. I don't know much about this whole coding thing. Would it really be the end of the world if we matched? You look like you've been sentenced to the firing range. I didn't push the issue as I rose from my seat, idly checking my watch and getting a gauge on how much time I had before I had to meet Quentin. There were a few hours before we'd officially meet up, and although I wasn't sadistic enough to continue subjecting Aaron to my teasing, there was something about the result that stuck with me. It felt like some weird version of fate, if one was to believe in that kind of thing. Realistically, Aaron and I were the least compatible men in the world. It didn't make much sense as far as I was concerned. When Aaron was a teenager, he'd been thrilled with our idle chit-chat, but one day he simply locked me out. I tried to reach out to him, but it was a fruitless cause. He wasn't only my best friend's son, but something of a friend to me as well. It was easy to tell when I wasn't wanted, though, and if one thing was apparent, it was how obviously Aaron wanted to be alone with his thoughts. I'll be looking into the code and see if there are any syntax errors. It's obvious we need to make some tweaks. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly where, he said quietly, not even bothering to look up as I stood. I lingered for a moment, watching the rhythmic clenching and unclenching of his fists. I didn't realize it took so little to get my favorite Omega in such a frazzled state, but I stored it in the memory banks for future use. I didn't really have time to torment the young man, as exciting as it would have been. Don't drive yourself entirely batshit with all of this, kid. Like I said, it can't be impossible for people to occasionally slip through the cracks of the coding algorithm. The fact that we've had so few misfires as a whole proves what an asset you are to this company. East Coast Sugar Daddies would be nowhere near this point if you'd not been involved. Relax, and don't overthink things. Just go with the flow, I said, in what I hoped was a convincing voice. Even the best coder in the world needs to make tweaks time to time, right? This isn't any different, and it doesn't speak poorly of your skill and ability. Just take the rest of the day off and get some rest. You're looking at me like I'm the Dark Lord himself. Compatibility match or not, if there is one thing I refuse to do, that's sexually manipulating Omegas into bed with me. He didn't seem as soothed by the comment as I had been expecting. He only seemed to draw further into himself, refusing to look me in the eye. I rested a hand on his arm, frowning as he flinched away from me. Aaron was certainly the least touchy-feely assistant I'd ever had, but it was still disconcerting that he jerked away as if my touch was wretched enough to burn. I didn't think getting matched on some app was that devastating or life-changing, though I did appreciate those who swore by the method. Aaron didn't seem as if he would believe in such ridiculous notions, but perhaps I didn't know him as well as I thought. I appreciate your kindness, but I really need to get back to work. The app doesn't code itself, and I need to check the algorithms, he said quietly, his cheeks tinged pink. I decided to humor him. I'd gotten most of the information I needed, and it was only fair to give him some privacy to stew in his embarrassment. Keep up the good work, I said with a coy smile, as I strode out of his office. I could hear a sharp exhale of breath as I closed the door, and I resisted the desire to laugh. Aaron was adorable, there was no way around that. It was a conclusion that I came back to time and time again. A link to purchase Sweet Nothings is in the description below. This title was a royalty share production, so I make 20% from any purchases. Thanks for listening.